Oh, okay.
And welcome, Michele Colopy, Executive Director of
Yes.
Lead for Pollinators, to our California Master Beekeeper webinar. We do 4 webinars a year, and we're honored that you have joined us. I know you're calling from the East Coast, so you're in Eastern time, so it's actually 10 p.m. So I appreciate your generosity of time and energy, sacrifice of your evening in service of our program. And I am going to hand the controls over to you, and I invite you, please, even though you and I have known each other, I think it's been almost a decade. It's hard to
Just,
believe.
just
Yeah,
about.
it's been
Yes.
a while. Through various beekeeping conventions and where I used to work, where you've worked before, I would invite you to just give us a quick couple of minutes, seeing as you're you and you know you the best,
Yes.
to just please give us a bit on why you're in the position that you're in right now and what you're going to be able to share with us this evening. So let me
Yes.
make you the host.
I'm trying to see where that extra screen is at the side. So I can, so if I just share my screen, I guess.
Yeah, you are correct.
Share the screen. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the screen and we'll
Yes.
start with there. Yes? Okay. All righty. So as Wendy was saying, I am the executive director with Lead for Pollinators. It's a new organization that I started. For about 7 years, I was with the Pollinator Stewardship Council, and I really heard from a lot of our members about the things that they wanted and they needed to make their club stronger in order to do advocacy and education. So I developed Lead for Pollinators, which stands for Leadership, Education, Action, and Development. And through this, we provide leadership training, education support to our bee clubs so that they're stronger bee clubs. They are better able to do their advocacy at the local and state level, and that they can learn about education, how to improve their bee clubs, as well as to take that action, because you've got to have a strong bee club in order to take action on local, state, and national issues. And then we will also reach out and collaborate with our bee clubs to do grant writing and collaborative projects and development. So I'm going to go here. Now, today we're going to talk about certainly how master beekeepers can lead in beekeeping through your master beekeeper skills and experience and training. And you want to take that master level into your state and local beekeeping associations, your master gardener clubs, if you're part of master gardeners, if you are in any other advocacy type group helping to protect pollinators, you need to also, as master beekeepers, be that expert on good governance within your organizations so that the organizations, the bee clubs, are sustainable, just like you are working to make beekeeping sustainable through your master beekeeping training. So certainly we want to look at today, and all of you did get a handout. I'm going to hold up a little piece of paper. I know that Wendy emailed all of you my handout, so it's going to have a highlight of our discussion topics today. So we're going to really focus on the mission. We're going to look at ethical leadership, connecting those qualified volunteers, and I mean qualified volunteers. And I'm going to say some things today that people might in their heads and at home are going to go, yeah, but we've always done it this way. That's the biggest thing that needs to change. We are much more diversified population in our bee clubs, and our skills in our bee clubs are different now. We need to find those qualified volunteers who can serve the club, not serve themselves, serve the club. And we want to understand those legal responsibilities of being a leader. Just like there are legal responsibilities when you use different products in the hive or around the hive, you have to read pesticide labels, you have to read those product labels of the products you're using in the hive. And if you violate the label, if you don't follow the directions, you are breaking the law. It is very similar to your legal responsibilities as a bee club leader, because the majority of those clubs are nonprofits and they are governed by laws of the state and the IRS. You want to look at those governance policies, and again, it's all about creating sustainable bee clubs so that it can help support sustainable beekeeping. Then we're going to look at how the master beekeepers need to be that example for not just hive management, but the example of responsible, sustaining leadership in our local and state and national associations. And then we'll take some questions. So certainly within our nonprofit bee clubs, and the majority of bee clubs are registered nonprofits. They are supposed to be registered in two places: the IRS, because the IRS gives an organization that nonprofit status, and within your state, either with the Secretary of State or the Attorney General. So that the mission is the most important thing, and that is what the board serves. The board serves the mission of the organization. They are not there to serve themselves. They are not there to pad their resume. They are there to do the work of the organization and to protect the organization. Because that mission of your organization, of that nonprofit, is there for that mutual benefit of your members. It's not for the singular benefit of any individual board member. It's for that mutual benefit. Even when you look at the California Master Beekeeper Program, where your mission, in a sense, is that the program uses science-based information to educate stewards and ambassadors for honeybees and beekeeping. Now, nowhere in there does it say Italian honeybees or Russian honeybees. It just says honeybees and beekeeping. It doesn't talk about raising cows, because it's about beekeeping. So your mission tells you what you are supposed to do and how you are supposed to fulfill that mission. And again, that is that purpose. Nonprofits can make money. You actually want your nonprofit to make money, but the money just rolls over to the next year. It is never paid out to the board members as profit or shares in any way. So you can make a profit in a nonprofit, but it is run like a business, and the leaders are there to serve the members and the organization. So the most important thing in any nonprofit is to maintain that members and donor trust. And according to every state attorney general, and all of them have a guide for charities, even California, and you can log on and get the PDF to California Attorney General's guide to for charities. And they all stress the same four things: the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, the duty to manage accounts, and the duty of compliance. These are the duties of every board member in a nonprofit beekeeping association. So this is important, and this is that kind of level of agreement all of the board members must have. But it needs to be part of the culture of the organization, that the board is working for the good of the club, that you have loyalty to the organization, so you're not trashing your fellow board members, you're not trashing the organization, that anything you do is for the benefit of the organization and doesn't undermine it in any way, that you have a duty to understand the finances. Now, a lot of people don't understand financial reports. I was the treasurer for a state beekeeping association for 4 years. I've done a lot of nonprofit accounting, and I am continually educating board members how to read the financial reports. A good treasurer will be happy to explain anything to you, because it is not a criticism of their work. It is that you want to understand, and that is your duty, to understand what a balance sheet is, what a profit and loss statement is, what are the income and expenses, what happens to the income and expenses if they increase or decrease. You have to understand, because you are responsible as a board member. It's not just a treasurer's fault if something goes wrong. it is every single board member's concern. So it is your duty to manage the accounts. And it is your duty to always be compliant with IRS obligations and your state obligations. It is not just the secretary or the treasurer's responsibility to know when they're supposed to send in their continued existence form to the state. Everyone needs to know when these things are supposed to occur to make sure it gets done, because as volunteers, sometimes life gets in the way and we forget dates, even if we have it on a calendar. There's nothing wrong with fellow board members reminding one of the officers, did you do such and such? I know you've had a lot on your plate. So it is your duty of care to help each other on the board, but to be responsible to maintain your member and your donors' trust. Now, certainly ethics in many is a big issue. And, you know, as someone once told me, even the quilting guild has issues. Anytime you get a group of people together, everyone has their own idea of what should happen, how a nonprofit especially should be run. I have worked in nonprofits for more than 20 years. I have worked with more than 15 different boards. And typically in that time frame, 2 people on the board, each of those 15 boards, 2 people each had any idea what they were supposed to do as a nonprofit board member. So it is always then up to the staff to train those folks. But it is key to have certainly ethical information and to be ethical in your approaches. So you want to pay attention to those, oh, I seem to have, there we go. Ethical leadership. You want the entire board organization to read that they will be ethical. You have got to have the president of the board inspiring and encouraging and requiring all of the board members to be ethical. Certainly the rest of the board has to always question, and there's nothing wrong with questioning and saying, okay, we're buying equipment and we're buying it from Bob, who's on the board. Is this ethical? Bob should not be part of the voting for this. We should have it as kind of a blind bid, so we don't know which bid is Bob's. You have to question these things so you are ethical. So you have that sense of transparency, but it has got to be everybody on the board. It's got to be the president promoting those ethics. It has to be the board supporting those ethics so that the members and the donors can trust the leadership because they are being ethical. So certainly there's a wonderful organization called the Standards for Excellence for Nonprofits, and they offer guidelines for how nonprofits can be excellent. Certainly I've heard from far too many B clubs that will say things like, well, we don't need directors and officers liability insurance because no one has sued us yet. They always add the word yet. So, and I go, well, you've just made my case. So whenever we have these issues that come up in nonprofits, people always add the word, well, these things haven't happened yet. Well, then take care of it so it doesn't. Certainly that ethics and accountability code is important for every organization. I realize our B clubs are small, but some of them can get quite large. And again, it is about that sustainability in beekeeping organizations, which we desperately need, and you as master beekeepers can provide that expertise. Because the board is responsible for its own operations, but they also need to evaluate their own performance. It's always good to look at what we are doing. Even in, I'm sure, the curriculum with the Master Beekeeper program, eventually Wendy and the group will analyze things, going, how do we need to change things up? What's more important this year? And reassess the program or the topics just to make sure they're meeting the needs of the Master Beekeeping class. Certainly the board should have those stated performance expectations, and you've got to hold each other accountable for attending meetings. You've got to hold your committee people accountable for providing reports, for participating in meetings, for involvement in the overall activities of the organization. Again, it goes back to that, the peer support of ethical leadership, so everybody is involved. You want to establish board development strategies, so the board and a nominating committee are truly recruiting quality, skill-based, needed new members to support the board and grow the organization. Because again, it's about sustaining the beekeeping organization so that you folks can provide that education to members, so that you have that vision to meet their needs. You've got to, and I know people always frown on this, they don't want to have term limits on boards because they say that no one will sign up to be a board member. And I'll get to that, because we keep doing that wrong. We keep just shouting at the front of the room, okay, we've got board positions open, who wants to be on the board? That is no way to recruit anyone. That's no way to welcome people onto the board, because you haven't told them what you expect of them, what are the skills needed, that is it fun, but yes, it is work. You haven't told them anything except, oh, well, who wants to be on the board? So you need a strong recruiting strategy to reach out to the members in your club to find out their skill sets, so that you have truly buy-in from the members for the long-term sustainability of the Beekeeping Association. So it is the board who's responsible for providing that orientation and education for new board members. And certainly where it's appropriate, get rid of board members. That is the hardest thing. I know a lot of clubs don't like to have a section in their bylaws or their constitution that says this is how we get rid of someone. But there are times you have to have it, because someone could either never show up for 3 meetings, well, then they're automatically out. Because if they're not notifying you that they can't be there, they're just, after 3 meetings with no excuse, they're off the board. If you have someone that is causing criminal issues or social issues with fellow members, how do you get rid of someone who's harassing another member? So you have to have some guidelines in your governing documents as to how to remove someone from the board. I hate to bring up this negative aspect, considering we're going through this virus, but if someone would sadly pass away, how do you remove that person from the board? Because if they were the treasurer, then the bank is going to ask for documentation, even if it's meeting minutes, and board, not just the meeting minutes, but the bylaws that say how you can remove someone without them being there. So the banks now have to have this documentation on file. So you've got to have a policy, a procedure of how to remove someone if you need to in an emergency. So certainly I'll let this cartoon sink in for a moment, because as you can see, there are no fresh ideas around there because they have no diversity. It's everybody, even the same green sweaters, I tell you. So when we're looking for the right board members for our organization, you want to look at that skills-based volunteer that you need. What are the skills the organization needs? Do not elect people and recruit people just because, oh, someone's nice. Those sometimes are the people who have no skill sets, can't even use email, and all they do is tear down the club. You want people who can, if they're the secretary, they can manage email, they can send out a newsletter, they know how to work the internet, they will respond in a timely manner to people's inquiries. You want someone who has, that access to the internet, so that's skills-based. You need to have, yes, job descriptions for the volunteer positions. So again, a new volunteer knows what is expected of them. You want to find the right members who have the right skill sets so that they can fulfill the specific duties. Now, certainly there's some members, and I've managed volunteers across my 20 years in nonprofits. There are some volunteers or members in the club that don't have the computer skills that are needed, but you know what? They are great at talking to people in the club. They love getting to know the members. They're maybe great at, they always bring that pan of cupcakes or maybe fresh fruits and vegetables, but they love talking to members in the club. They're a person who could be an at-large board member, and their duties really are to greet everybody as they come to the club meeting every night. They're the one who can follow up if someone is ill, or if somebody got injured or needs help with an emergency situation with bees. So you utilize the best skill sets of people for the right job. But you would not hire the person who can't use a computer to suddenly be treasurer. You would not you wouldn't recruit that person for the board, because you're setting them up to fail. Because it's not just nominating people, you are finding those skills that are needed for the success of the club. And it is really all about the ask. We all like to be appreciated. It's having people serve on committees is a great way to try out, to audition people for board roles. So if you put them on a committee and they're always there on time, they take notes, they get their work done, they participate, that's a person who you can easily go to them and say, you know what, you were great on the county fair committee. You got everything done in a pinch. You filled in on some shifts when some people had to cancel. We really have appreciated all the work you have done. We really would like you to run for, based on, again, their skill sets. People love to be recognized and asked, but shouting a statement at the front of the room, who wants to be on the board, is the worst way to ask anyone to join a board. Appreciate those folks, get to know those folks, find the right skill sets for your board members. Now, the characteristics of those outstanding board members, certainly anyone who's got that pre-existing passion for the cause. And we all know sometimes those first-year beekeepers really have a lot of passion. So again, you direct that passion to the right place where the organization needs it. Because sometimes the first-year beekeepers are not the best ones to do education, but they can, again, be there to staff a booth, hand out stickers of Save a Bee or whatever. They're there to interact with people, but they have that passion for the cause. Certainly those board members should always be eager to participate at every meeting. They've got to prepare ahead for meetings. If a treasurer or a secretary or a committee chairperson has taken the time to write a report for everyone to read, and they send the report out a week ahead and no one has read it, one, that's insulting to the people who did all that work, and two, you are not prepared, because those people want you to ask questions. They want you to know what's going on. So be prepared ahead of the meetings. That's just professional and respectful. And you are working to protect the organization by doing that. You want to serve on committees. Don't overextend yourself, because sadly, 20% of the people typically do 80% of the work. And that statistic is that way because we're not recruiting enough of the people. We need to recruit 80% of the people so they're all doing 20% of the work, so that all of it can get done. You want to make sure that people can give above average financially. And I don't mean writing a check. I mean, if the organization has things to sell, whether it's bumper stickers, you're selling DVDs about beekeeping, maybe you have a state license plate, they have to be able to be willing to promote it at local clubs, at their membership, to encourage them to support the organization and support beekeeping. So you want them to give that above average support of these things. Certainly, if you have some members who can write a check to help support a project, that's great. However, you want everyone to support the activities the club has, different fundraisers they're doing, certainly the county fair booth or whatever other community activities, they should be out there supporting it and encouraging the rest of the members to support it as well. And again, it goes back to that duty to the club. The board members have to have a strong desire to steward others, to provide that stewardship in beekeeping and that stewardship in the beekeeping club. They've got to be supportive, but you've got to express your own opinion. And when I say opinion, it's not all what we have right now with all these pundits. It is, if you have a question about the financial report, discuss it, bring it up. Don't just keep something at the side or talk about it behind the treasurer. Ask the treasurer. And don't necessarily always ask the treasurer a question offline. Do it in front of the rest of the group, because they may have had the same question. Because sometimes it might be just a typo in a financial report. I know one time when I just set up a chart of accounts, PayPal fees was right above payroll liabilities. Well, the Bee Club had no payroll liabilities, but my cursor slid too far and the PayPal fees got entered where payroll liabilities, that title came up. So someone noticed that error on my part. We corrected it. But you want people to help you proof these things. You want them to ask questions. It's not being confrontational. You are trying to educate yourself and to protect the organization. And a good treasurer is happy to have your questions. You want to learn as much as possible how to run your organization. Again, across 15 different boards, typically 2 people on boards that I have worked with knew how to be nonprofit board members. The rest had no clue. And they basically did their own idea of what it could be. And far too many of them were in it for themselves, not there for the mission of the organization. So you certainly want to continue to learn as much as you can. You're doing that as a master beekeeper. Do that in managing our nonprofit bee clubs as well. Because our great nonprofit leaders certainly are self-starters. That's what you are as a master beekeeper. You decided, I'm going to also go through all of this process of becoming a master beekeeper. So you're a self-starter. Certainly you've got a passion for beekeeping, and hopefully you have a passion for your local club. You want to accept and motivate others. And one of the issues that has come up across the country that I've noticed in the past 7 years, we are quite diverse now in our local clubs. It is not our great-great-grandfather's bee club anymore. We have women who are beekeepers, not just the wives of beekeepers. Many of the clubs are representative of the population where there are sometimes more women than men in the clubs. We have people of different religious backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds. We have got to be willing to accept and motivate our others in the club. Certainly, I ran across the local club where a Muslim gentleman in a greater metropolitan area had joined the bee club, and he was a new beekeeper. None of the beekeepers wanted to mentor him because they didn't like his religion. But your bee club does not, that mission, unless it says we are the Christian beekeepers of Darke County, Ohio, then you have to, again, be willing to accept and motivate others. Many bee clubs now also will have a non-discrimination policy. And if you're going to write grants, you have to have a non-discrimination policy. So you want to practice it. You want to be servant leaders, serving the club and serving the membership, servant leaders. Certainly you want to deal well with conflict. And I've heard from a number of folks, they're confusing what conflict is. Conflict is not asking the treasurer, could you explain the income and expenses on just the fair booth? Okay, let's break that out. That's not conflict, that's a question. That's asking for greater detail. That is not a conflict. A conflict is when Bob, who is selling his bee equipment to the club for the field day or something like that, and he doesn't want to recuse himself from the board for the voting. He doesn't want to leave the phone call or the board meeting when everyone votes on who gets the bid. That's a confrontation. Or a conflict. So you want to make sure you've got that ethical leadership, that everyone is in agreement of what the policy and procedure is, which can reduce much of those types of conflicts because you have policies and procedures to protect the organization. And you want to think strategically as a group. We all have a lot of different things now going on in our states. What with the state pollinator plans that got developed, and then drift watch has come into some states. And so there are a lot of things we now have to deal with as beekeepers, but we need to start thinking strategically and then implement tactically to, again, sustain our beekeeping organizations and beekeeping overall. Certainly, you've got to have that financial acumen, as I mentioned before, under the duties of care and compliance and loyalty. You've got to understand your finances. But those fundraising skills, again, it goes back to just promoting what the organization is doing and supporting those fundraising abilities, but understanding the tax liabilities that might be there for fundraising. A lot of people will say, let's do a GoFundMe campaign. You might be you might have to pay taxes on whatever you raise. So make sure you know how you're doing it, what you're doing it, and what your liabilities are. I was consulting with a state association, and they had to catch up really on 36 months of sales taxes. Thankfully, the fine wasn't too bad. However, they had sold things that were not, it wasn't honey, it was bumper stickers, it was books, it was DVDs. They had to pay sales taxes on that. So you have to understand those fundraising skills and the responsibility of the organization. Most importantly, listen to the members in your club. Listen to the board members. Not everyone speaks well enough. Sometimes we jump ahead and leave out words. So listen to people. Don't just instantly react. Say, okay, I'm not understanding completely what you're saying. People just want to be heard. You've got to practice that sound judgment, which comes from listening to people and getting all of the information and understanding it. Don't be one of those board members that just rubber stamps things, because again, every board member is responsible for the actions of their fellow board members. So be persistent. Certainly you've got to have that stamina. Anybody who's worked a county fair booth, you have to have some stamina. So keep that in mind, and certainly appreciate the volunteers. Give those volunteers breaks when you can, but realize there is that physical and emotional exhaustion level, but appreciate those volunteers, and especially those who have that additional stamina. Certainly keep the board strong. Again, it goes back to diversity in membership. Women are not the only ones who can be the secretary of the club. So you want to make sure that everyone has the same opportunity to run for all of the positions, all of the board positions. Your board should represent your membership. I was with an association that stated, we have one woman on the board, that's all we need, that's all the diversity we need. Well, that told all the women a lot. So again, the women in our bee clubs are now beekeepers, not just the wives of. You want to look at how you can possibly recruit community representatives to your board, those master gardeners, other people in agriculture. So you have those diverse viewpoints, and it's an opportunity to collaborate with those other groups. Again, set those term limits, put them in there, rotate people off the board. It's just healthier. Set that schedule to review the operations, and certainly look over your governing documents, update them as you need to. So many people have in their bylaws or their constitution that voting at an online meeting can't be done online. So you always have to have an in-person meeting. That's not going to happen sometimes. Look at what's going on now. Even as we look at nationally, how do we vote? Can we do it by mail? Look at your governing documents. Does it allow you some differences in how you can vote as a board or as the membership even? Many of us struggle in state associations at our annual meeting that the membership has to vote on changes. You find a different way to do it, because not everyone who comes to the conference takes that time or remembers to vote. Can you do it by absentee ballot, by online in some way? Look at using technology to benefit you, but you've got to update your governing documents. Look at developing a strategic plan, just like you develop a plan in master beekeeping for how am I going to handle my hives this year? What's the management techniques? What am I going to try that's new? And how am I going to manage and track these different hives and what I do in each one? It's the same thing with your nonprofit club. What is the strategic plan for this year, and how are we going to make change and serve our members? And certainly you can look over that strategic plan, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, because again, we have a lot of things coming at our bees, and right now we have a lot of things coming at our bee clubs. As Wendy and I were talking at the beginning of the hour, that what are the clubs doing now to engage with the members, since we can't hold in-person meetings? Miss a few meetings, it's hard for people to come back. So what is the vision the board has to bring people back into the fold, to educate them, to keep them up to date, to find out what's going on, to find a way to have that fellowship again? So responsible board management means having operational and financial policies and procedures, which are not part of the bylaws or constitution. Keep that in mind, because it's too hard to change. The bylaws are, you want operational policies and procedures to be flexible enough to change with technology, to change with local and state laws. So you've got to have them as operational guidelines for the organization. It helps to protect the organization, and it carries on certainly paperwork guidelines, so it makes it easier for audits. It's a reference tool. It helps in ethical decision making. So policies and procedures, while yes, it can be tedious for many people, find those board members or those committee members within the membership who love drafting financial policies and procedures. You might find you have a CPA within your membership who's been kind of hiding because they didn't want to be elected treasurer, but they'll come out and help you with policies and procedures. Utilize the expertise of the people you have in your club. you can have those short-term committees, which many professionals, especially whether it's lawyers or CPAs, who will go, okay, I will serve on a committee. I know it has a beginning, a middle, and an end of project. I can take my expertise and provide it to the club. And that's a wonderful way to build that fellowship, get that expertise in there, and you're helping again with the sustainability of your bee club. So certainly, again, these policies are paraphrasing the law, they're explaining that procedure, and it has that express goal that the organization has to follow. And it can help diminish embarrassing situations, harmful situations, improper behavior, but you've got to have the policies. You don't want to make them up on the fly. So you have got to, and it helps in those situations that sometimes are generational. I have heard from a number of state associations at their state fair booth where a gentleman of a certain generation, so maybe in their 70s, 80s, 90s, is used to patting kids on the back, maybe on the rump, good job, whatever. But parents today go, you know what, I don't know you and I'm finding that creepy. So you have to have procedures and policies for someone to go and talk to that individual. You have to have those volunteer guidelines of how someone will work at the fair booth for the organization, maybe move that gentleman into another position so that he's not around the children. And it's so hard to change generational behaviors. But that's not the type of lawsuit the club wants to encounter or deal with, is someone claiming someone's getting too touchy with children. So have policies and procedures to protect the organization, that person who it's just a generational behavior, and the other volunteers at that event, as well as the customers and non-beekeepers coming to the booth. So responsible board management, certainly the IRS loves it when you have policies and procedures, because that means they really are not going to come to you as much. They won't check you out and see what's going on. Certainly it's good to be transparent, post those policies and procedures online. You can make sure it's part of an orientation booklet for your board members. Certainly share it with your club members. Many organizations at least have a few of these policies, and the IRS certainly likes these: a conflict of interest, an expense reimbursement, a whistleblower protection. If someone has a complaint about the board president, they want to be protected from any retribution by possibly someone who's a little cantankerous. So have a whistleblower protection policy. Certainly you need to have a gift acceptance policy. And if you have affiliates or chapters, have policies for those as well. It is just a standard of excellence so that everybody knows their responsibilities, what are the guidelines, and they're protecting the organization. So certainly some other board related and organizational policies, the ones that are in bold are the ones you really should focus on. I realize this is an overwhelming list for many people. Personally, I go, ooh, this is a challenge. And I created a lot of these policies for a state association I was with, but the ones in bold are the ones really you need to have. And again, these are as policies and procedures, not something that are amendments to bylaws or the Constitution, policies and procedures. Certainly that diversity is important. Meeting attendance, that is really for the board meeting, not membership meeting. Let's not beat up our members, but the board who gets elected to serve the organization should attend every meeting. And if they can't, for some reason, we all have life getting in the way, they have to advise the president and probably another officer why they can't be there. Can't be out to the movies. I'm sorry, that won't qualify. All the meetings are set up, you have to be there. Certainly, nepotism is one of those that you need to examine. We have a lot of family members that will serve on a board at the same time, and they really shouldn't. It just doesn't look good. It can cause problems for the board if they would get divorced or have a fight, or if it's mother and child or father and son. So have one of the family members go to a committee, but you don't want two people from the same family on the board at the same time. And certainly you can have even a personal appearance policy. When people are going out to volunteer at your county or state fair booth, you want them to look good. You want them to represent the bee club and beekeeping in a professional manner. You don't want someone there in a dirty t-shirt and food in their beard. Yeah, you want them not to stand there and use a lot of four-letter words as they're talking to the public. So make sure you have that policy and procedure. People like to know what's expected of them. They really do. They really do. And that is what volunteer management is all about. You're telling those volunteers, these are the expectations to support the quality and professionalism of your beekeeping club so it is sustainable. Now, certainly a majority of states in the United States have an association of nonprofits, and they are there to help nonprofits be better nonprofits, so that you can certainly check into Cal Nonprofits, because we have to realize the value of our volunteers. Of all of the nonprofits in this country, look at that, $187 billion is the value of the volunteer hours. So appreciate your volunteers. Thank them. Recognize those volunteers for doing a good job. Sometimes even just showing up, thank you for bringing the cupcakes. You were great welcoming everybody at the meeting tonight. I'm really happy everybody's here. People want to be appreciated. So make sure that you track those volunteer hours, you appreciate those volunteer hours, and you get those volunteers who can help sustain the beekeeping organization and represent all of you on the board and the membership in a positive, supportive, sustainable light. Because every board member is representing every other board member, and every board member represents every member in that club. Now, certainly one of the things we do at Lead for Pollinators, and it is our inaugural conference this year, talking about becoming 21st century leaders. We are doing a Women in Beekeeping and Agriculture conference at Walsh University in North Canton, just 3 miles from the regional airport. In October, we are hopeful and highly optimistic that everyone will be able to go to conferences again. And it is a beekeeping conference unlike any others. While the focus is women in beekeeping, men are certainly welcome, but we are talking about some of those issues pertinent to women, whether it's being a minority within a minority in an organization, whether it is how to run board meetings, how to do accounting for a small business, how to take a product from an idea through patenting, through development, and marketing it and running a business from it. We have 33 different topics on leadership, business, and safety that we will be presenting, because that is what we are here to do, is to help support beekeeping itself, and especially women in beekeeping for this conference, but it is certainly valid information for men as well, and we welcome everybody to check out our website page, and you'll see a tab that says Becoming 21st Century Leaders, and you'll see the list of speakers, and your instructor, Wendy Mather, is actually going to be one of those speakers. So I think I'm going to open it up now for questions, and I'm not sure, Wendy, if you have to take the thing back from me hosting or not. Oops.
I got it. It's all good. Thanks, Michelle. That
Okay.
was a very informative talk. And I'm sure we do have a lot of questions. So I invite you to unmute yourself if you do have a question and ask away.
Hi, Anne. My name is Trish McAleer, and I am a board member of the Orange County Beekeepers Association. A lot of what you have said is gems. It's really wonderful information. I would love for our entire board to hear this. I don't know if this has been recorded and whether or not there's a way for me. Wendy, do you have that answer for me? That perhaps there would be a way that I could share this with my entire board.
I have 2 answers for you, Trish. The first one being this is being recorded.
Yay.
And 2, I will invite Michelle to answer how everybody could experience this. Yeah, what are the services that you can offer to bee club boards in California?
Well, certainly. Well, we can certainly meet with folks over Zoom or Skype. Um, GoToMeeting's okay, but so far GoToMeeting, the coverage is kind of shaky. So, but we're happy to meet with boards to try to talk about some strategic planning issues. We do a lot of different things on that leadership side, helping you with strategic planning. We'll help facilitate that so that everybody in the organization can be part of that strategic planning. It's good to have an outside facilitator so that we can help with strategic planning. We're happy to help with grant writing, collaborating with you on it. So we can either come out to California when we're all allowed to travel, or again, we can do a lot of these things over the intertubes, as they like to say. So we offer a variety of services to help you improve the leadership in your club. And to look at those policies and procedures. Certainly our services aren't free. We are working on our own grant writing to help provide some of these things for probably a small number of different groups, but we're reasonable and we're happy to talk with you and consult with you as to what your needs are and how we can work together to really serve you and meet your needs.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle, I have a question.
Yes.
I've been I'm a president of a bee club in the San Francisco Bay Area. And one of the questions I've been wrestling with is what is your experience been with the proper amount of reserves we should have set aside in any given year?
Well, certainly I know, pardon me, it can be, well, really you have to look at what are your expenses every year.
Right.
And you can then go, okay, if we didn't make any money, then how long can we last? If it's only 6 months, you probably need more. It really is based on what your expenses are. What are you doing? If you've got $100,000 budget every year, then, and you want to be able to survive for 3 years, then you're going to need 300,000. You know, what are you doing with your lifetime member dues? Are you spending those or are you setting those into CDs or some other investment strategy? I would advise you to ask your club members, say, we're looking for just a financial person, a CPA or a financial planner, just for advice. You're not going to give that member your money to manage, but find out who has some expertise in your club and talk to them based on your expenses that you have and your goals, that strategic planning. You know, I think many of us are going to find possibly a drop in our revenue in our clubs, whether it's loss of members or, again, what is your focus? So strategically, you may have to start to look at, okay, we need to bring in some grant monies to do some programs, but yet what are the programs? You have to have the program developed before you get the grant.
So there's not necessarily a general guideline in terms of it should be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 months.
Not really, no, because again, it goes back to your expenses. Certainly, I was with a group or the audit that said, okay, based on your reserves, you can, if you had no money coming in, you can last for 1.5 years. So that's not terribly good.
Is there a time where you'd say you have too much cash?
Yes. Because again, you are not a foundation and you are supposed to be returning that money to the organization. However, it's good to have a rainy day fund. But I know of a state association that has $400,000 in their bank and they don't want to spend it on anything. So, and to me, that just opens the organization up to, sadly, a bad treasurer or someone else who will slowly embezzle the money. Because it has happened across the country that treasurers and other leaders have embezzled money from bee clubs. There was one poor gentleman who had a tax lien. He became treasurer. He opened the bank account in his social security number, which he should not have done. And the IRS found it and took all the club's money. So you have to find ways to protect that money, but each state is different on some of their financial planning and guidelines. So get a financial person from your state. Look at what services you always want to provide and how far out do you want to be able to provide them. But that also starts to look at strategic planning, not just a guess.
Yeah.
What you want to do, how is it you want to grow? What are some of those threats you see coming up?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Ooh, anyone else?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so is it your recommendation to have a set meeting time so it's consistent, or do you suggest, querying everybody and setting the time?
Yeah, it depends on your group. If your group of your board members are all retired, maybe you can have a floating date, but at the same time, even retirees now are sometimes busier than when they were working. So at the first meeting of the year, set all the dates. People are busy. They like to know if it's the third Sunday every month or every other month, set it up. Certainly with Easter being one of those floating little holidays, make sure when you set up the dates, it's not falling on Easter or some other holiday, Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving. So, those basic holidays, Labor Day, Memorial Day. So, but set it up for the entire year. Help people plan their lives. But when you have to spend so much time a week before every meeting to set up next meeting, that is such a waste of people's time. So you want to value people's time, tell them ahead of time, this is when we're meeting. If you can't meet it, then, because someone's going on a cruise, or I get that, that's a bad analysis. If someone's going out of town, then certainly they'll tell everyone up front. I can't be there on that date. You have that excuse. It's no reason to kick them off the board because life got in the way and they had something else planned. But set up the dates ahead of time. Again, be considerate of people's time at each meeting. So set up the dates, the beginning of the year, that's when the meetings are held.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Oh.
I have a question. This is Rachel. I'm the president of the Sacramento Area Beekeepers Association. You had mentioned finding great roles for volunteers that match their skill set or their interests, but also that new beekeepers are often the most passionate. So in thinking about that, we've kind of been looking through our new membership versus renewals. And I would say that of our 175 to 200 members every year, almost 60% of those are new members. Right. So in thinking about coming from a nonprofit background, the volunteer life cycle or something like that, where you're trying to, not only retain members over time, but once you're working with a volunteer and putting them in a leadership role to develop them, do you have any recommendations on kind of applying something like a volunteer life cycle that builds in the retainment of volunteers in roles, even if maybe they lost their colonies over the winter and, maybe they don't how do we keep them in the club outside of just the beekeeping advice and more as, the camaraderie and the association that they've invested time into?
Right. Well, certainly, again, it goes back to developing those volunteer job descriptions. So what are those needs at every meeting? Do you need people to set up the room? Do you need them to also tear down the room? Do you have someone to take attendance if you are maybe you're voting on something, or you just want to know who has showed up every meeting? What about refreshments? Who's greeting the program person? So what are the needs of the club? Write these things down in job descriptions. Don't just make a whole list of what you need. Start to break it out so that you maybe have board members at large that are doing things. You've got committees who are doing things so that people know ahead of time what are the needs. And some folks maybe only want one or two things to do, and others are going, yeah, I can do 6 things at once. But you need to have it written down and make them feel valuable. Again, like that person who's great at greeting everybody. Hi, glad you're here. Here's a seat there. We've got handouts over here, or there's new beekeeping magazines here. Those are the people who are quite valuable, so that, yes, sadly, if they lose their bees, it's still a learning experience. They can learn more. They're not the only person to lose their bees. I bet everyone here on this call has lost bees at some point, either through swarming or the weather, or you have no idea they were just dead. And that's the joy of beekeeping. We're always learning about and from our bees. So it's the same within our club. We can learn from each other. So you have to listen to those folks. Maybe they've got some great ideas, so that you can always leave an other at the bottom of, say, a list or a survey of what else can you do, or what skills or what ideas do they have. And it may be, you know, there are those people who love to teach 5th and 6th graders about bees. That's a real stretch for me talking to kids. So, but other people are great at that. So find those folks and challenge them to take on some of these things. Even if their bees did pass away, they still can be in the club, so that you involve them in that fellowship. But you've got to welcome them. And when you reach out to find someone's skill sets, again, don't shout it at the front of the room who does what. You can have a written survey. You can do it online through an email. You can do a survey on the Facebook page or through your website. Reach out to people in a variety of different ways, because as some of your members come to the Bee Club, they maybe had a work issue or a home issue that's really pressing on their mind, and they don't even hear half of what's going on at that meeting. They take a piece of paper home and forget about it. But then they get an email 2 weeks later and they fill out the survey. So we have to be proactive in how we reach out to our volunteers in these clubs to bring them into the volunteer aspect, not just as a member who sits in the chair and sometimes just fogs a mirror. You wonder if they're still awake. So bring them into the organization, welcome their skill sets and their ideas. I know we've all run into those folks who love to talk about how they sing to their bees, and the bees really like it when they're at middle C. You just have to nod. Not everybody does it that way, and it's okay. But don't put them down. Don't, again, you want to accept and motivate everybody. Because again, that person could be great with kids. And maybe at your fair booth, you have a little kids table area, and that person is fabulous, and it's the most popular thing in your fair booth. But you've got to welcome those skill sets and find out that that's what they want to do.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Rachel. It's awesome. I have a comment from Sarah. She says, I like that you mentioned diversity and welcoming the variety, especially women beekeepers. I'm on the board. And aside from myself, the 2 other women on the board are, quote, the wives of the beekeepers, end quote. From what I can see, only a few are beekeepers. I actually didn't think about diversity as women until you said this. So just a comment, which is great.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other questions out there for Michelle?
Well, certainly you do have my email address if you want to email me. It is on the handout, as well as, oh, it was on the handout. Yes, it's there. The phone number's on there and the email is on the handout. Feel free to reach out to me if your fellow club leaders have some questions. But I really do encourage you as master beekeepers to take that lead and take it also into your beekeeping organizations and help to educate folks. I know it's very difficult because we have our clubs who we've always done it this way. But it's a new century. We have got to get into the 21st century. We are still using over 150-year-old beekeeping equipment. We can't run our nonprofits that way. We just can't. They have got to be sustainable. They have got to be quite ready to deal with advocacy and action issues at our state and local levels, and they have got to serve our members so that beekeeping is sustainable in the club as well as in the hive.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I believe I can speak on behalf of everybody here from the camp by looking at a few of the chats. We really appreciate your insight, your knowledge about not-for-profits, about boards, about volunteer recruitment, and you are really a one-stop shop for all of this. So we have your contact information. We also now have this wonderful informative recording that we are able to share with our members. And perhaps you'll be hearing from some of our members in the future. Yeah, seeking out your guidance, Michelle.
Well,
So
I'd be happy to talk to anyone, and certainly if there's some questions in the chat that I didn't get answered, Wendy can forward those to me and I will answer them and she can share them with the group.
yeah, there's my club takes it to a we've always done it this way to a new level. That's a thing, right?
Yes.
Somebody else is saying I am currently a regularity consultant and happy to help. which is an awesome
Mhm.
offering of generosity of time and service. So thank you, Kathy. And just general thanks to you for your time and your sacrifice of your late evening. So
That's
we wish
okay.
you sweet dreams there on the East Coast, Michelle, and we look
Okay.
forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Take good care.
Okay, then.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Good night, everyone.